Hello and welcome to another episode of Drafting Notes, the spin-off show to the popular podcast Page One, where rather than chatting with an author each week, Mark and I discuss a burning issue in the literary world that we have been chatting about ourselves. And this week we are chatting about the querying process, specifically the query letter, that first initial stage of the process where you reach out to an agent to ask for representation. It's an area which I think people are always stressed about. I know we've both been stressed about ourselves. You know, we spend so much time trying to get that letter right, the tone of it, what do you put in, what do you keep out, what rules do you have to follow, etc. And so I thought it'd be quite a nice topic to have a little chat about that and dive into that a little bit more. So Marco, when you've written query letters in the past, what's your kind of first thought that you always have whenever you come to write a query letter?
Oh God, I don't want to do this.
Kill me now.
No, I suppose the first thing to do is to try and hone your pitch down to those 2 or 3 paragraphs. You know, actually, I suppose that's taking it a step further. What you should always do, first of all, is look at the particular agent that you're wanting to query and check exactly what they want from a query.
100%.
Because that's the most important thing, because they get so many queries that they will throw out anything that does not comply, even if it could be good. So just make sure you do that. But we'll come back to that in a minute. But yeah, honing your story into that 2 or 3 paragraph blurb almost, I think, is what's important in that query letter. Or that's certainly what I start with before I then try and start to do the query letter itself. And I think what you're trying to do there is different from a synopsis, which is another nightmare, and we'll probably do another episode on synopses. In that you're not trying to give away the whole story. Mm-hmm. It is more like a back of the book copy or blurb or whatever you want to call it, where you're trying to entice.
100 words, isn't it, or 200 words? It's a really short, punchy.
Yeah, you're trying to entice the reader into being interested in the story effectively. So, if you can do that, then I think there is a variance in approaches. I think depending on whether you're querying in the UK or US, whether you launch straight in with that pitch, or whether you give a brief summary. I think what is sometimes called the metadata of the novel, which is not, I think, the right use of the term, but it's what it seems to get called, where you're saying, dear so-and-so, I'm enclosing the opening pages and synopsis of my, historical thriller, blah, which is complete at 90,000 words. It would appeal to readers of X, Y, and Z, and then you put the pitch. Whereas I think for some American, or certainly the American approach sometimes is, dear blah, John Smith is a broken man living in a perfect world, blah, blah, blah. And you go straight into the launch from there, sort of a thing. So, honing that story down, there are, I think the best thing you can do is probably Google and look at different techniques. There are many different suggestions, but I found for me, the best thing to do was just go and read some back of the book copy for some of your favourite books that you know the story to. And try and pull, see what it is that is drawing you into that, and see how they've drawn those elements of the story that you know into just those that brief summary.
I think it's always surprising to me how little you need to put into that 100 words, 200 words summary. I think the way I always kind of do it myself is I totally do exactly as you say, and I'll look at my favourite books, and I'll say, well, how did they do it? Because I know the story, and then I see what's made it into the final 100 words, and then when I sit down to do my own, it always ends up being 500 words. It's far too long. You put and you go through it, and you're like, actually, they don't need to know about that bit of the plot, and they don't need to know that, and they don't need to know that, and by the end of it, I'm like, actually, you don't need to know probably 90% of that first draft that I put in there. It's broad strokes. It's just enough to give you a flavour of what the character is, what his journey is, etc., without having to go into the minutiae detail of it.
Exactly. You're trying to make them read the pages that you're presumably enclosing with the query. So, and you might be enclosing a synopsis as well. Most agents will want to see a synopsis as well, so they might read that after. But you're just trying to entice them. And I think often with these things, because you've held this story in your head for so long, you know the details, and there's a temptation to put a lot of the detail in there. There's a temptation to put that other character that's very important to the plot. But in fact, when you're summarising it, you don't need to mention that person at all.
Exactly. Yeah, stuff just like that. I think characters that are major to, as you say, to the story, but not important to that 100 words, cut them out. Backstory that's not important, cut it out. He's person A, he needs item B to do plot thing C, and
otherwise D.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, we were chatting to Jonathan Lee on our episode, our podcast we recorded just yesterday, and he had a really interesting way of phrasing it, where he talked about it was like a CV, and you're almost kind of bragging a little bit about how you kind of you oversell yourself a little bit on a CV often. You kind of brag a little bit, and I think doing your synopsis, it's almost like that. You're almost writing this, you're almost pitching this kind of like exciting sounding. This
isn't the synopsis, remember.
So you're right, it's not. But for the 100, I think for the 100 word thing,
the
even
blurb or whatever.
It's almost a perfect. It's almost what you want the book to be, right? It's what you want the book to. It's what you want people to think about when they think of your book, or to get excited. You want to get people excited, and you want to even if the book's not quite as good as that image that they create in their head from having read that 100 words. That's what you want them to get. You want them to think of. This is exciting. I want to hire this person in my company, and obviously translate that to books.
And if we assume that you can get the blurb down, then the next thing that I think what a lot of people worry about with query letters, and which is important, I think agents do want to see it, is comps or comparative titles, and I think what people worry about is that they always go, there's no book like this though. That's the point. That's why I've written this story. And they get too focused on what their book is specifically about. And I think the best comps that I've seen are very loose things. Or sometimes you can say things like this, the grim dark style of Joe Abercrombie mixed with it meets the I don't know, I can't think of something like that. But you know what I mean, you don't need to say
world of so and so or whatever.
Exactly. You don't need to say it's exactly like those other books.
You can pick and choose themes or flavors.
It's got an element or a theme or something that you're drawing from these books.
And I think you're right, and I think that with comps, people often do say, there's no comparison, it's really unique. And my worry with that is always publishers want to know what it's similar to. They want to know how they're going to market this thing. So they want to know, okay, if it's like Lord of the Rings but sci-fi, that's great. We know exactly how to market that. We know what will sit next, etc. So I think you want to be able to give it something, even as you say, Mark, that it's broad strokes lifted from here, there, and everywhere, and you're kind of, and it doesn't have to be books. It could be films, video games, TV shows. Any kind of narrative of any kind. I think it is enough to pluck from.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think the one thing I would say is that you mentioned Lord of the Rings there, and I think what is cautioned against as well is that you want comps that are relatively recent,
150 years old. Yeah,
like comparing yourself to the absolute classics in your genre is a very, very dangerous game, because you are setting a bar so high.
Yes, that is true.
Or sometimes you're setting a bar against something that isn't really, yes, everyone knows Lord of the Rings, everyone likes Lord of the Rings, but it's not really the type of fantasy that sells anymore.
No, I was going to say, would Lord of the Rings be sold nowadays?
Yeah, not in today's market. I don't think it would.
Not enough romanticy in it, not enough dwarf.
Or it's not grim dark enough, or
not dark enough.
Times change, and I think that's why and also publishers and agents are keen to know that you understand the market that you're writing in, and that you're, because we've talked before in the main podcast whether you want to write a story. You're a writer if you want to write a story that you don't really care about the commercial success of it, and you just want to tell this story, and it's important, and maybe, only a handful of people will read it, and that's fine. But if you're seeking out an agent, then generally they are concerned with commercial success, because that's how they get money.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So you do need to pitch that book. You do need to find those comps, look at in the genre that you're writing in, and as I say, pull out elements. It doesn't need to be it's exactly like this book or it's exactly like that book. In fact, you probably don't want that. You want to say it's got the prose similar to, or it will appeal to readers of X and all this sort of stuff. You can use these little phrases to draw the elements out of these books. I'm just going to try and find actually my query letter to in relation to one of my books. But yeah, I don't know what you think about that point.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think you want to keep. I think you want to keep the query letter short, like a page, ideally. No more than that if you can help it. I don't think a query letter needs to be long. I think a query letter is all about a couple of things: giving a flavour of what your book's about in like a paragraph or two max.
Mm-hmm.
So they read it and they think, "Oh, this I totally get what this journey is about, what they're going for, what the goal is, what the pitfalls are. I can see the tension, the drama, etc. Great." You want a bit about what comparisons. Okay, cool. It sits next to these books. I can see where that again. That's helping me get a flavour of what the book's about, the kind of style of it. I can, how would I market? I'm already thinking about that. And then I think you also, and I think if you're able to do that in 2-3 paragraphs, you're also showing kind of in a bigger view that you're able to write succinctly and follow instructions that they've put on the website, and that all ticks boxes.
And what you're trying to do with the query letter is get them to read the pages that you've sent to them. So that's what you
not
do want
them
to.
A reason.
That's why importing. That's why it's so important to read their rules, because every agency you'll find has a slight variation on what you need to do, and make sure you pay attention. Some want submission in one document, some don't want a synopsis, some want an email that has everything in the email, which then leads to a nightmare of formatting. What do you do with formatting?
Some people want it 1.5 space, some people want it double space.
No,
some people,
exactly, all of these things.
Don't give them any reason not to just bump it.
But at the same time, the one thing I would say is that if they say something like, give me the opening 50 pages and your chapter, or the opening 50 pages and your chapter goes over into page 52 or something like that, I'm personally would be tempted to just send them the 52 pages.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah.
It's more important that they get to the end rather than stopping mid-sentence or something.
I think common sense there, right? Like, if you send 200 pages, they're going to be like, what the fuck? But I think if you're like 2-3 pages over because it rounds out a scene, I don't think anyone is, if they're enjoying what they're reading, they're not going to be like, oh, this is brilliant. I saw page 51.
Exactly.
Off you go. So it's be sensible, but don't stress the small stuff like that. And also, to be fair, I know we've just said don't give them a reason to throw it away by not having your line space right, etc. We have chatted to a whole bunch of agents now, and they all have said pretty much, as long as it's like I would be surprised if you got chucked because your line spacing was wrong. I think they will have some leeway. There will be some folk who will automatically say no, but I think a lot of agents will give you some leeway.
I think what you're doing though is you're giving yourself a disadvantage.
I agree. I think that's right.
They'll be quicker to dismiss it, even if they do start to read it. It'll give you'll start on a bad.
Especially if you've not attached it, if you've put it in the body of an email when it shouldn't be, or stuff like that will get you bumped, I think, because they've got all these rules about
and certainly if they say no attachments and you put attachments, then I think automatically
it wouldn't even get opened. I think because they're too stressed about stuff.
So going back to what we were saying earlier, I was just going to read this out because this is the sort of thing that I used in my query letter. So I said, a fast-paced historical thriller featuring the political intrigue, darkness and deception of the novels of S.J. Paris and Robert Harris's Cicero books, paired with the Italian historical setting seen in books such as D.V. Bishop's Cesare Aldo series, and starring protagonists akin to Scott Lynch's Locke Lamora series. City of Blood and Water is a blend of crime, action and adventure amidst a Venice that is beginning to crumble from its grand era. So I think what I've done there is I've been able to draw in recent authors and even different genres. Scott Lynch's fantasy, this is a historical book that I wrote there, but I'm drawing out aspects of that and putting it in, and hopefully in that paragraph you get a feel for what the type of story is going to be there. You get all the elements that you need to say, yes, I want to read this, or no, I'm not interested in that sort of story.
Yeah, I think it's a very good query letter. I think it's concise. It goes straight to what the book's about. It doesn't mess around, and it's, as you say, very quickly you get a sense of the nature of the story, of the comparisons, and it's all of that stuff just helping give just enough flavour for them to say, I get it, I want to read it. Let's go.
Yeah.
And the world's in my head now. I know, let's see what the writing's like. Let's see what the actual prose is like.
And then the last bit of the query letter is that bit about you.
Yes.
And the personal bit about you.
Yeah.
And I think here again, especially having spoken to some agents, I think what a lot of agents, I think it was Juliet Mushin said, she doesn't need to know that much about you. She'll get to know you if she's interested.
Yeah.
And so don't put too much in that, but just
a paragraph really is enough.
Like a short paragraph about, any other writing you've done.
Yep.
But, it's not like the bit of the CV where you say you like to go hill walking and all that sort of stuff.
No, because ultimately it's also the least important part, right?
Yeah.
Like the book is important, and the quality of the writing and the pitch for the book to show that you understand the market and you understand where it would fit in the market and etc. All that stuff is what they're looking for. Who you are is far less important. It's still important, obviously, but it's far less important. I think a paragraph that says like, I live in blah blah, and this is my job, and here's the other writing I've done in the past, and I'm really beyond that. It's
anything
hard
other writing related, I'm part of a regular critique book or something like that is useful.
I think you're right. I think as long as it's limited to writing stuff, awards you've won, other books you've written.
But like my favourite movie is X or whatever. Don't put that stuff in.
I think keep it short. If you're trying to keep your career letter to one page, this is a part of it. I think you can keep it short. It's just a paragraph of who you are.
The other thing, and this one I think you get conflicting advice on. So I'll say what is often said, and then I'll give my view on it, and you can tell me what you think. But which is whether you should personalise the query letter in some way. Mm-hmm. Now that was heavily emphasised a while ago. I think it's becoming less emphasised now, and I think it's fine to say something like, "I'm querying you because I really like X, who's an author that you represent," and something like that, or I'm querying you because I heard you on this podcast and I thought you might be interested in this story. That sort of stuff's great. A generic sort of, I'd really like to work with you because you're a great agent or something like that is, it's less necessary to me. I don't think you need to put, they know that's why you're querying them. That's why you're writing a letter to them.
Yeah.
And again, they get so many queries these days that they don't need that stuff. They want to know what the story's about. Can this person write? Am I going to be interested in it? And then they might read the next pages. I
think I agree with that. I think I'm personally I'm always far too nervous to try and inject any kind of personality into the query letter, with like jokes or asides or personal reasons for wanting to do. I definitely view the query letter as a kind of quite a really straightforward XYZ. Here's a bit about the book. Here's a bit about who I am. Thanks. Let the book speak for itself. Let the sample chapters do the heavy lifting. I think if you've got a connection to the agent, if you've met them at a book festival or an agent 1-to-1 or something, mention that. Say, dear so and so, part of it. I want to. I'm looking for representation. I'd love to work with you. We met at blah blah blah, and and play on that little connection you maybe got. Maybe that makes them think, oh yes, I remember chatting to so and so. He was a normal human being. That maybe gives you a bit of a tick box. But I think go much beyond that. I'm worried that it comes across wrong in the letter, and it makes.
I think that's
look
right.
Like
I think I suppose
or something.
Yeah, I think what it is that be professional first and foremost. Treat it almost like you're applying for a job. But
100%.
These requirements. Yeah. You're not going to go wrong doing it that way.
No.
It can work if you tell, if you put a funny
I mean,
joke in it or something,
we've all seen cover letters that are written in that kind of
it
humour
definitely
and
can
stuff,
work,
and
but it's much
it's
more
a risk,
risky.
Yeah.
It's much more risky, and so just playing the odds, I suppose. Maybe that's our legal background, is playing the things too safe. But that's what I'd be inclined to do,
No, I
is
agree.
to try and keep it more on the professional side.
And, I think go hard and just go really, really go for it. Dear dickhead, just just throw caution to the wind.
You could try that. I mean, certainly you'll probably get known in the agency if you do something like that.
That's only
we have heard, we've spoken to agents on the podcast. You can check those interviews out on our YouTube channel. They're full video interviews, and we've heard some horror stories of some query letters and things like that, and things you shouldn't do. So we're going to wrap this episode up, because we like to keep these as short and sweet, but do check out those industry episodes. Yes, exactly, just like a cover letter. And we'll definitely probably come back to this topic, to querying in general and stuff, on these drafting notes, if people find this useful. If you did enjoy this, you get these episodes on our Patreon a few months in advance, if you sign up for the Patreon. Otherwise, they do eventually come out onto YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And there's all sorts of other great benefits on the Patreon as well, so please do check that out as well. But otherwise, we will be back on the next episode of Drafting Notes, and of course on the main podcast, Page One, the Writers Podcast. We'll speak to you then.
See you later.